I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson, Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a really nice federal card table, which means it's made, between 1790 1810. It's made of it's beautiful mahogany veneer, crotch mahogany with satinwood banding. It's a card table because it opens up. And then this top is supported on the swing out legs. This table's got a lot of issues. First and foremost is this leg has been completely broken off. The tenon is just, it's not so much a tenon, it's this whole piece here is just completely broken off. In addition to that, it's got a lot of veneer issues, a lot of loose veneer coming up, which I'll try to glue down. It's got areas where veneer and pieces of wood are missing. So I'm going to try to repair everything and then polish it up. We'll see what we've got. The top is screwed down to the base. I don't know if you can see, it's got a screw right here and around the perimeter. And so I think I'm going to see if I can take this base off, and that'll give me a chance to see better what's going on with this old repair of that leg also. I'm going to start with the repairs on the top because there's so many veneer repairs. I even have repairs around these hinges, but I'm not going to take these hinges off. Number one, the felt in the middle is one piece, so it's not coming apart. And these knife hinges are always very problematic, getting them on, getting them off. I think I'll just do the veneer repairs around the hinges. All this veneer right along the edge here seems good. I do have some repairs to do to this little piece on the edge, this beading, I guess you might call it. So I can use this to tape off this felt just to help protect it. This is interesting where this stringing is bowed way out. It's too long. It cannot be pushed back. I assume that the table has shrunk this way, and now I'm going to have to cut this to take some of the stringing away. So now I've cut this. It's still too long. I was hoping that the saw kerf would be just the amount I needed to take, and now I've got a difficult task of trying to trim this. I think what I'm going to do is glue down this part of it, and then when it's held solid in place with the glue, I'll be able to trim a little bit off of there. I've only recently learned that this tapping technique is called percussing. I learned that from a client who's a doctor. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Now I can see how much I've got to cut this. Just a touch. In fact, I think instead of attempting to cut this piece that's still loose, I think I'll cut the piece that I glued, because it's being held in place. It'll be easier to cut. I still got to cut a little more. I think I'll use a chisel. Now I got a space there, of course. Try to scrape away some of the old glue. The tighter I can get that in, the closer it'll be to filling that little gap. Now I'm going to set this top aside. I've got lots of other places to glue. I'm going to set it aside so I can glue the leg on to the table base. Boy, now you can see what a mess we've got here. Not just a mess where it broke, but it's got all this glue all over everything. What's happened here is the people that made this table did what I'm sure they thought was pretty cool. What you have here is like a, I guess you'd call it a saddle joint, and it's dovetailed. I can show you the other side. In other words, they cut through their leg so that the apron runs through it, and with a really nice little dovetail here. But the problem is, in so doing, they only left what looks like about a little bit more than a 1/4 inch, 5/16 of an inch back here, and the same in the front. And so I've talked about this many times in the past. You think that you've got a leg this big, but you don't. You've really just got a leg that's 5/16 of an inch, but still they created this weak spot, which I'm sure the leg got hit with something, and it just broke off. So the first step is take the heat gun and maybe some hot water and see if I can get this glue off. Okay, I'm ready to glue the leg into place. I'm going to use epoxy because I have such a lousy joint here and there's so much space. Even though I'm going to come in from behind with a piece of wood to support it, I want to epoxy it. I'm going to need all the strength I can get. First, I'm going to tape off the front of this. I don't want to get any epoxy on the front of the leg. I can't clamp this leg too much. I'm going to set it here, out of the way place, and make sure I get the leg into position. Although I'm measuring my diagonals here, which look pretty good, I'm also just going to, I set it here so I can step back and take a look at it and see if the legs look correct. Alright, now I'll just let that sit there and not move till tomorrow. Alright, now I'll continue with finding a loose veneer along this edge and gluing it down. Here's a piece that's missing. I think I'll glue down a little piece of mahogany banding, then afterwards go back and do the little stringing along the top. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Seems pretty sturdy, so now I've got to decide what I want to do in the back here. I'll set the top aside for a little while. Alright, well now I've got some repairs to do. I've got some veneer to glue down here, and I also have to rebuild this area where the broken leg was with the inlay. Good, while that's drying, I'll go back to work on finding more loose veneer on the top. that came out really smooth. And I'll still have to, fill in these cracks and smooth this a little bit. But now I've got to work over in this area. I got some chunks of wood missing here, and more importantly, some of this banding and inlay I've got to recreate. First step will be to start carefully chiseling out all this epoxy. So I need two different kinds of inlay here. I've got this what's probably tulip wood banding with two pieces of ebony on either side, and then below that I've got what's probably rosewood with holly on each side. Actually, they share that piece of holly between them. So let's see what I've got. Here's a piece that's really close. This is a large piece of inlay that I made. Here's a piece of store-bought inlay. I might just need to cut off the outside ebony stringing, and it leaves me with exactly what I want. All along, it was my intention to epoxy this leg into position and then come behind and round in a spline through this cracked area. This leg now is so solid that I'm afraid, and I'm always worried about this, that by cutting in the spline, even though the spline itself might be strong, that the areas around the spline, I might be weakening the piece. So I've decided I'm not going to do anything to this. I'm not going to spline it. It's solid as a rock, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Sometimes less is more. I had to epoxy it back in place. The joint was so terrible, regular glue would never have held it. The epoxy seems like it's doing great, so I'm going to leave it at that. I realized as I'm devising my inlays for this very bottommost stringing that the opening here at the top of the leg is too wide. I don't know why that is, but it is. So what I've got to do, I've got a piece of mahogany here. I've got to have the grain running in the same direction as the leg, and I've got to cut just a tiny little piece of mahogany there and put that in at the top of the leg when I do this inlay. So I think I'll do that first. Now I've got a nice piece of thick veneer here that even has a little bit of this same kind of grain, to see if I can line it up in a similar direction. I've got an uneven surface here, and there's lots of little voids down in there that I'm gluing to. So I'm going to mix some high glue with a little bit of sawdust and a little bit of powdered color, and hopefully that will then provide enough solids to fill those gaps and voids. So now for my next patch here across the top of the leg, I've cut 4 pieces of wood. 2 pieces of holly, a little piece of walnut, which actually, whatever kind of wood that is, it matches it really well. And I cross-cut this tiny piece of mahogany for the top of the leg with the grain going in the correct direction. I think what I'm going to do is attempt to glue all 4 pieces together. Then I will take them and trim them up and sand them and make them fit. Alright, this is looking pretty good. I just need to go over to the sander and take a little bit more off my extra mahogany I got on here. Alright, this looks good. It's really tight, but that's okay. I'll be able to clamp it down in there. I just want to say while we're doing this, these clamp marks here are not from me. They're from the last guy. Hopefully I'll be able to get rid of them. Okay, I'm anxious to take these clamps off, see how that little patch went. You can see that I've been finding other loose places. I'll probably continue to find loose places throughout the job. This looks good. Now I've got to clean out this area and do this piece of banding. Okay, here's the banding I'm going to use, and actually I have that piece of holly there, so I just need to cut this down to the tulip wood and then cut the ebony off that outside edge, and it should fit in there. It should fit in there just fine. Okay, I've got my pieces ready to glue in there. I cut a little piece of mahogany to go into the bottom because that whole space was a little deep for my veneer. But I'm going to set this aside, do this, and glue them both at the same time. Alright, I'm looking forward to taking these clamps off and seeing how it comes out. Okay, so now I need to get back to this top. I've got some touch-ups to do and a little bit of bad scratches here. I'll start off by cleaning this top with just a little bit of a commercial cleaner here. I'm going to pad this a little bit just with some alcohol. I want to see what happens. I kind of like the way everything sort of disappears as I'm patting it. That's a good sign. I think I'm going to carefully brush some shellac into all these scratches and defects, see if I can fill them up a little bit. Then I'll see if I can level it off and then pat it. Good, now while that's drying, I'll get back to the repairs on the base. Looks good. I can start sanding this. I've got to trim up this piece here. Okay, I've sanded my whole repair area up here with, and this other area here up to 220, and now I'll seal it with some shellac. Okay, now back to the top surface. All the areas where I brushed in shellac, let it dry overnight. I'm going to try sanding with 800 gold first, see if that works. The 800 paper really isn't doing it. I'm not getting this leveled off as much as I'd like. I think what I'm going to do is sand this entire surface with 320 gold, and I'll brush on a coat of shellac. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Most of it looks really good, except there's some funky areas over here. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to try padding it a little bit just to see what happens. I'm using a product that's made for French polishing, and I'm not going to use my own shellac. I think this will work really well. The padding is actually helping a little bit with those marks, but it's not going to get rid of them. Maybe what I'll do is sand this with really fine paper, 500 or 800, and give it another coat. Okay, back on the base, I've sanded this whole repair area with 100, then 150, and now with 220. I'm going to brush on a coat of shellac now onto this repair area. I'm going to seal it with probably a couple coats of shellac before I start doing color work. Back onto the top here, I've still got this little area I patched in. A coat of shellac on it. Now I'm going to put a little color on it. I'll let this coat dry and then put on another coat. This is maple dye stain, and it's pretty thinned out. I may keep putting on coats, let it dry, put on another coat. My coats of shellac have dried overnight. Now the next thing I'm going to do is sand this area again. This is my repair area, and try adding some color, especially to my new pieces. See if I can get them to blend in. I'm loving these new little brush tip graining markers. Okay, so I've touched up a lot of the lighter areas. Now, you know, the whole part where I sanded and stuff is brighter. I'm going to tone it with a little bit of perfect brown aerosol. Alright, light color shellac went down pretty good. I think what I'm going to do is sand this with 800 gold and then rub it out with 4/0 steel wool. The banding here is not flat. I did not sand it flat. Even places I repaired, you know, it's got a lot of up and down, so I couldn't sand that area. I just got to be careful with the steel wool. I can see, you know, the steel wool cutting away the shininess, and I keep doing that until it's even. You just got to be patient. Yeah, this looks good and has a really nice sheen to it. That's just the shellac. I haven't even waxed it. I think I'll just need to go over it with my wax polish as opposed to paste wax or anything like that. Okay, I think the next step will be to assemble the base to the top. Then I'll polish it. Yeah, remember I taped the screws right with the holes they came out of. Okay, I'm going to go over this with beeswax polish. First thing I'll do is I'm going to take this plastic off and do this inside edge. So this is it, a nice little Federal card table. Opens up to play cards. Has two swing legs in the back. And if you remember, this leg was completely broken off. I re-glued it, repaired it, and replaced a lot of wood in here. There's numerous other veneer repairs. I actually didn't even show them all in the video. Glued down lots of places along the banding, lots of places on the edge. Everywhere there was missing, I put in new wood, especially around the hinges here. I put in some new wood. It looks pretty good.